We're certainly delighted to have all of you here tonight. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Dorcheat Historical Association and Museum Incorporated. We certainly want to thank Patty and Charlie Odom for providing this wonderful facility for us, Andress for providing food for Charlotte and Martin, for doing our cooking of our refreshments. We've had a tremendous amount of help in working on the museum, doing what we've done so far. We've gotten financial assistance and labor too from many different individuals, organizations, government bodies. It's really been wonderful there. I've put about 50 copies of our financial statements right by the door there, and I hope some of you picked it up. I know some of you can care less about the finance, but others want to know what we're doing with the money that so many of you have given to us. So it's important. Also, we've gotten a lot of free gifts of labor, which has worked out very well. At the present time, Richard Baker has a couple of painters working down there. They've been working for 6 or 7 days, working on the cabinets, and we've certainly appreciated that donation. We hope that you will take the opportunity this evening to make a commitment to the museum for this year and for future years too, because we need a lot of money, but we promise you we'll definitely spend it well. As far as the museum construction is concerned, we've had the services of John Agan, our historian who's guided us to do things properly as far as telling the story of Webster Parish. And then Larry Milford is a wonderful artist. He's been our designer, planner, and then doing the actual artistic work. And he, as well as creating history, I really think what we will have when this gets done is a real work of art. We think that this will probably be the finest small museum in the state of Louisiana. When we get through with this meeting, because we will have Frank Collins, we ask you to go down to the museum and see what has been done so far. I'm one of these people who likes to get everything done yesterday, but it's taken a lot longer than I wanted to take. But on the other hand, if you did it my way, you wouldn't want to look at it. But it's really going to be good, and it's the process of getting practically all our cabinets finished right now. The painters are painting them. As soon as we get that done, well then we will go full speed. I know the last time we got cabinets very zoomed along and got lots of things done. And we've had a lot of excitement about the museum lately. People have really gotten a lot of interest, particularly in telling us things that they might have that we would be interested in having in the museum, and that's really great. We have a wonderful executive director in Schelley Brown. She's the kind of person that has an idea a minute, and which is great. But the good thing about the ideas is it's not an idea of what somebody else will do, but it's what I'm going to do. So that's an unusual idea person. At this time, I'd like to call on Schelley to introduce our speaker. Schelley, where are you? Thank you.
Thank you, Dad. I have a pillow on my bed that says I'm not bossy, I just have better ideas than you. So, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, especially with the weather being as bad as it is. We've got a wonderful night in store for you. Frank Griffith, I know a lot of you may have seen him at the Minden Cemetery tour this year, but he's going to speak tonight, and just, I think Frank's even a little overwhelmed in the amount of people and the response that he got on how many people wanted to come tonight. But I know he's got a wonderful talk ahead of us, and then directly after Frank is finished speaking tonight, if you would, please go to the museum. The museum's going to stay open for about an hour after Frank's through, and we want all of you to see the progress that we've made. When I take people in there that have never seen the museum, the first word out of their mouth is, wow. I mean, and it's every person that's walked in there, that's the word that comes out of their mouth. It's very impressive, and as Thad said, it's not like what you expect to see in Minden, Louisiana. It's very, very impressive. So, like I said, we urge all of you to take that tour through the museum tonight. Another thing, all of you have pledge cards. I hope if you don't, I have them in my hand. As Thad said, it takes a lot of money to do what we're doing. I feel guilty actually for getting paid for doing it because it's something that I love, but everybody has to pay their bills. It's my dream job, and I hope that this museum, I hope that you all feel that it's your museum, not just my museum or Thad's museum. It's the whole parish's museum. And so it's very important that the whole parish get involved with it and contribute to it so that it does feel like it's their museum. I would like to ask you all to turn your cell phones off if you have them with you tonight. Cell phones are my pet peeve when people are talking. But please turn those off because we are recording this tonight so that we'll have what Frank is going to tell us forever. We hope we don't lose it. But please turn the phones off, and I appreciate that. Most of you got our needs list that was on the back table. We are completely out of those. There are some more of those over in the museum. We need a lot of items. So please, please look through those lists. Things that you may not even think that we need. So please look at that list. As I said, the money part is very important. So before you leave here tonight, please pick up a pledge card. I'll have them in my hand, or if you don't have them, we'll have some over at the museum. And I'd like to introduce our feature speaker tonight. Most of you know Frank. When I saw him portray his father this past year at Ghost Walk, I knew that I had to get him to give a presentation like this. I know that all of you will enjoy Mr. Frank Griffith tonight for a special night for the museum. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Frank Griffith.
Wow. I didn't expect this, but thank you for being here. They told me they wanted me to talk about Old Minden. Well, what is Old Minden? If you move back about 35 years, roughly from now, you're back in the 70s. It's Old Minden to some of us. If you move back another 35 years, you're back into the 30s before World War II, and that's Old Minden to me. If you move back another 35 years, you're about to turn of the century, and that was Old Minden to my daddy. And what I'm going to tell you tonight is all hearsay. My daddy was born in 1867. He was a war baby from the Civil War. He said that it took his daddy about a year to get home after the war was over, and said he immediately begat me. My daddy walked out here to Louisiana with the wagon train in 1888. And I said, Daddy, why did you have to walk? He said, son, you never rode in one of those wagons. And I said, walking was a lot easier. He came out here to teach school and to relieve Marcus Wren's granddaddy at Elm Grove, Pine Grove, where he had been teaching for 20 years. And my daddy only taught 1 year. He couldn't take 20 years. He told these stories to me during the Depression when I was a teenager, and he was older. He sat on the front porch in the summertime and smoked that cigarette and threw it across the banister and never put one out in his life. But he told all these stories and they stuck with me. And I can relate them almost verbatim. So sometimes you might think I'm telling it as if I were there, but it's all hearsay. One of the more interesting stories that he would tell me about sometimes was when he was first courting his wife, who was Kate Phillips. And the Phillips had a big plantation up on Blackburn Road, which is right on the line between Claiborne and Webster Parish. And the cars were up there, and the crows were up there, and would leave here to go there, and that lake would be up full of water. And he said, man, he said, the buggy would start floating and the horse would, get nervous and run with it, and said it almost drowned you, but the dad was a free meal and a good-looking girl. I stuck with it and ended up marrying her and lived in Minden. But later, before this, he worked for the Clickman Nursery in Home. And he actually played professional baseball for him and got $20 a month in room and board. He caught barehanded, and he tried to teach me to catch that ball with my hand moving back so that it wouldn't hurt me. Well, I couldn't do that, and I also couldn't throw it from third to first. It's not only in the air, even rolling. I just could not play baseball. And his great nephew, Joe Bill Adcock from Dorcheat, of course, played for Springfield Sports and was ended up in Milwaukee, was a great baseball player. And Joe Bill won the Texas League Turnout one night in Fort Worth in the 12th inning when he hit a home run. And my daddy got on the telephone and called everybody he could at 1 o'clock in the morning to tell me. He almost disowned me because I couldn't play baseball. Later on, when he was involved with the Griffith Stadium that the city named after him, he was a great baseball fan, and we'll get into that a little later. One night, he said we were playing poker in the back end of a saloon there on the square in Houma, and said the sheriff came in and said, well, boys, he said, we got to deputize you. He said, we're going after Link Wagner. He was supposedly an outlaw up in that part of the world. And my dad said, well, Sheriff, we ain't lost no outlaw. Said, you just go on without us. He said, well, if we do, it'll cost you $5 fine. Said, well, get us a horse and a bottle of whiskey and I reckon we'll go. They went. And they had a lot of people that it was led by Dr. Day and Tom Kinder. Tom Kinder, not Linda. And one group of the men went around behind the house, was way around behind the house, so they wouldn't hear the horses. And the other group, when my daddy went to the front door, and so Dr. Day called in to Link's mother and said, is he in there? And she came out on the porch and said, Doctor says he's in here, but y'all go away. He said, he'll hurt you. Well, about that time he came out of the house. He had a rifle in one hand and a pistol in the other and shooting both of them, and they said he could drive a 10-penny nail at 30 paces. He said, we all ducked down behind logs and ducked behind trees, and old Dr. Day and Tom Kinder got in a push fight with the horses, and Dr. Day fell off of his. He was riding a big gray. Tom Kinder was on a sorrel mare. Says Link walked right around behind that house, and we expected to see him blown away in a minute. The other posse got the wrong house. He got away and walked through the house. We've been out there all night long, and the whiskey had run out too. They tell a lot of stories about that, and you hear a lot about Link Wagner, but you don't hear anything about his brother. His brother was named Spank Wagner, and Spank wasn't wanted for anything, but Spank played the fiddle. And anywhere that they had a dance or something, dinner on the grounds, Spank was there. And Link was sort of a Robin Hood to the poor folks up in that part of the world. He never was found guilty of anything, even though they killed him here in the jail, but he was wanted for various and sundry things that he had done. But he would give to the poor folks sort of like a modern day Robin Hood, and all the people up in the countryside sort of supported him. They wouldn't tell the law where he was, and they wouldn't get involved with him. They wanted to see him succeed in what he was going to do. But anyway, the Lincoln and Spank Wagner story kept going and going and going until they finally got him in jail here, and they came to town to kill him, and they did. And they say that the story is that Sheriff Mims hid under the Presbyterian steps. Well, that is true to a certain degree. The people that were coming here knew that the sheriff might try to prevent them from getting into jail and killing a prisoner. So they were prepared to take care of the sheriff, and they sent 2 people down to get him and to hold a gun on him, and they put him under the steps, and he got under there for self-preservation. He didn't get under there out of fear. They were sitting there holding the gun on him until after this episode took place. But that's one of the early stories that he told that I'm always interested in hearing, and I heard it lots of times. He told another story that back in the South Carolina days, where he was born, that his youngest brother was, my daddy wasn't born then during the Civil War, he was born in '67. And so his youngest brother was taken down when the Yankees came to the house to steal their food and steal the horses and everything they had. And they took him down to the cornfield, the slaves did, and lay down in the cornfield with the youngest brother. But his next youngest brother was about 14 years old. And while the Yankees were there looting the place, his younger brother, Jim, came through the yard, barebacked on a sorrel pony, holding on to his mane and hollering and kicking as hard as he could go. And he talked about his mother out there in the yard with a broom trying to hit the Yankees' rifles from shooting at him. And they didn't hit him, and he got away. Now, where he went, I don't know. He got away, and they didn't capture him. And that was the end of the story. I don't know what happened from then on, but I thought that was pretty interesting to almost have verbatim a Civil War story to tell. I mean, he just missed it by a couple of years. My daddy got elected sheriff in 1900, and I told Ted Reiser when he got elected sheriff here in 2000, I said, don't feel big-headed. Now, you got elected in 2000 and Governor Foster signed your commission. My daddy got elected in 1900 and Governor Foster signed his commission. He said, no, I can't be your daddy, that's your granddaddy. I thought, no, that was my daddy. So he had a lot of stories to tell and a lot of history. One of the stories that he liked to tell so much was they had an election here, and I don't know what the election was for. Maybe he told me, but I've forgotten that. But right down here, which I know is David Brothers Drugstore, but right on this next corner, this building was right across from the old courthouse. Not the one that some of us remember down there, but the one that was torn down about 1902. But this election was for something, and I don't know what, but the group of people that worked against it wanted a certain person to be elected. So they weren't sure he was going to get elected, so they decided they stuffed the ballot box. So Gilly Butler had a funeral home right here on this corner, and they had the casket stored upstairs. And so a group of them got up there with a ballot box exactly like the one in the old courthouse. And every time they saw somebody go in there, they'd mark the ballot just like they thought he would vote. And somebody had heard that Mr. Joe Miller was going to pull a trick on him. He was going to vote for his man, but he was going to take a silver dollar and scratch an X on it and put it in his ballot. So they got a silver dollar, scratched an X on it, and put it in the ballot and voted the way Mr. Joe Miller would vote. Well, after most of the voting was over with, they had a school teacher here named Spam who was crippled. And he wore a big old overcoat all the time because he walked sort of funny. And so they got Spam over near the courthouse with this other ballot box, and they started to fight. And the windows of this old courthouse came all the way to the ground like they used to build them. You could just step in the courthouse or step out of it through a window. So while the fight's going on, they switched these ballot boxes. And Spam put it under his overcoat and took off. And years later, when they tore down the Methodist church, they found it in the steeple. And Mr. Joe Miller says, when it was over with, and he looked at it, he says, I know you cheated me, but I can't figure out how. So they got by with that. But things happen here like they do today. You know, in those days. One of the things that my daddy's first wife, Kate Phillips, did was the Police Bureau awarded them 50 cents a day to feed the prisoners. And so she cooked beans and cornbread. They got every kind of beans there was, but they only got the same cornbread every night. And she got her 50 cents to make a little money. Of course, they didn't make very much. They never had more than 3 prisoners at a time. But $50 half a day in those days was a pretty good living for a lady that was just doing it on the sideline. So a lot of funny things happen like that. Daddy prevailed on old man Tillman. Now, when we say old man Tillman, that was Daddy's terminology. It's not mine. I'm not being disrespectful for him to him. But he prevailed on old man Tillman to hire a girl named Dora Dupree from Gonzales, Louisiana. And he said, oh, she was a young black-headed French girl up here that was just as good as gold in that clerk's office in there. Said she worked in there and did a good job. Said she got married and she moved off to Texas. I said, when she came home, said I went down to Depot to meet them. And she got off there. I said, Dora, by golly, you're still a good-looking thing. Says, you and your husband got any young'uns? Says, no, Griff, said, we ain't brought forth none, but we've had a heck of a good time trying. She was probably the first woman to ever work in the city government in Minden and work in the courthouse. And Dora lived into her early 90s, and she rented an apartment from Carlton Fraser right across the street from me. And I got to visit with her in person and talked about my daddy with her, and I thought it was wonderful that I've heard all those stories about her. Some other things happened up on Elm Street where my daddy ended up living. Kate Phillips had two sisters, Ada Rathman, who married Mr. Leroy Rathman. They were just one house down from where I live now, which is my daddy's old home. And her other sister, Eva Morrell, lived right across the street. So it's sort of a triangle there with those three sisters. And Daddy said, well, Kate really enjoyed it being up there with her sisters, but said, I'll tell you what, two sisters that close is worse than the mean mother-in-law. It worked out all right, so we got along. Mr. Leroy Rathman would get up on Christmas morning at 6 o'clock, and he would play his cornet to Joy to the World. And everybody in that neighborhood then, you know, nobody had central heat and central air or anything else, so your voice or music carried a long way. The dog barking a mile away, you could hear it, and you could hear him playing that cornet. And they say he played the trumpet, but it wasn't. He played the cornet, and he chewed tobacco, and he sang in the Methodist choir. And he chewed tobacco all his life. I don't think he ever was without it. He's singing in the choir or anything else, but he did it, and he did it well. So we've had some real characters in Minden, and we still have some. You know, I could talk about, they wanted to talk about old houses. There are a lot of old houses around here, but when you start thinking about old houses, you think about what I call old Minden, is before World War II. So, man, we didn't have any houses, and suddenly here's a shell plant out there with 10,000 people. Somebody's got the house, and so the federal government comes in here and they build houses. They build what we know as the Fairfield Apartments. That's those apartment houses on the city road, on the left. There are about a dozen of them out there, so. And Daddy said, well, they built them out of such old green sweet gum lumber. They didn't buy Beat and Better or anything else. He said, they'll get up and move a foot and a half during the night when they start screeching and so forth. But they were run by Wilma Harwell's mother. I don't know whether Wilma's here tonight or not. She was supposed to be, but they were run by her mother, and she ran them for the whole time during the war here. They also built the Tillman Edition, and Daddy just knew Tillman Edition would rot down in 3 years, and it's still there going strong. So sometimes the idea that the very best of lumber in those days was something you ought to have, but it wasn't necessary. The houses still last over 100 years. We had a man here named Dave Carson, and Dave Carson was building a house one day, and he's building it out of cement forms they had used to pour cement with, and they had cement on them, and they looked mad, and he was framing it up. And I says, Dave, aren't you ashamed of yourself putting all those old lumber in a house there that, He said, oh, son, said, that lumber will be here when you dead. Don't worry about it. And it is. Those houses are still standing, and they're out there in what we do as West Edition. But the house building in this town really didn't come from just the federal government. It came from Mr. Bobby Turner. I'll tell you what, they call him Uncle Bobby sometime, but Mr. Bobby Turner built houses. And he built them everywhere. He built them every size and shape and form. And if you just went in there and said, I want a house, he just started building a house, and he worked out his hip pocket. I wish John Minden was here tonight to tell you, he said with his estate, I don't know, he must have taken 3 years to get all that stuff figured out. But he built some houses now. And his nephew, Floyd Turner, his Red Turner, continued right on behind him, building houses. But we've had a lot of old houses, we've had a lot of construction, and to sit here or stand here tonight and talk about old houses seems a little bit foolish. I know that some of you might like to hear about them, but one of the things that happened here that was unique, we had a fireman, fire department fire chief here named B.F. Turner, and he lived in the house that the judge lives in now, right at the end of East and West Street. And one night, one afternoon, there was a fire, and I was about 10 years old, and I'm standing on the front porch of my house up on Elm Street, my house now, on Elm Street, and here comes the fire truck. There wasn't a lot of trees around there then. Now that fire truck is wide open and it tries to turn on Good Avenue. Well, it can't quite make it, and the steps to that associate house, as we know it as, that where Bob Andress lives now, is at an angle on the front, and the fire truck went right up the steps. It scarred it up. The scars are still there. And the only person right on the back of it was Sugar Doo Strong. I don't remember Sugar Doo, but Sugar Doo was his old man. And Sugar Doo's mother lived just 2 houses down the street. And she saw him, and that fire truck humped that hump. It threw him up in the air with a cliff. And she came running up the street. Now, Sugar Doo was a pretty good sized old boy. He said, "Oh, baby, Sugar Doo, baby, are you hurt?" The fire truck turned and went down the bank over in front of George Life's house and hit the back end of a car and stopped. And nobody was hurt. Don't know where the fire was. Never got into that at all. Mr. Joe Lee, who lived out in Leeton, and it was named for a Lee town, was Joe Leeton, got married. And his wife said, well, he says, I'm not moving out there in the sticks, giving up any social life in Minden. And unless you build me a house just like the Spiller's house is now. You want a house just like that, where Howard Spiller lives. And it was built by Will Fitzgerald, who was a machinist at that time and was doing well in life, had a number of children and had money, and he had designed that house with an architect, and he built it where Howard Spiller lives. Mike's mother's daddy lived here. So he said, okay, I'll build you a house just like it. And if you go to Leeton and you turn right, like you're going up through alternate 2, you will see a house sitting there on the right. And it is the same identical house built from the same plans. And Eugene Frazier was born and raised in the house right across the street in Minden. So one day I took Eugene up there and I parked him in front of the house and I said, Eugene, do you recognize anything? No, I don't recognize anything. I said, well, you look at that house every day of your life when you walk out your front door. Oh yeah, that's the same as the bank's house. So, you know, these families that moved here early from the Carolinas and from Georgia, they still spread out. And you've got to be very careful how you talk about anybody right here. You end up getting to them. Marcus Ben's granddaddy married a car, and my great uncle married a car. So when Marcus found that out, he thought, my goodness, that's almost tater by kid folks, and I don't know whether I want to fool with that or not. And I said, oh, Marcus, that's not going to hurt you. Go ahead and accept it. But the one that really got it was Mike Harper. I said, you know, Mike, we're almost cousins. And I thought maybe it might cut me a little slack if I wanted to buy something, but after he looked at it for a while, he went up $1 to So no matter where you are or who you deal with around here, we go back a long way. Luther and I played on Buchanan Street. We had a little club down there called the Bucks. Luther Moore, I'm talking about right here. And it was B-U-C-K-S, and we all had a little card, and we had our picture taken. He's got a copy of it, and I have too. We go back that far. John Benton's name was in my garage when I moved back here in '94, written in chalk, because we had a rubber gun war up there, and we had different teams. And his name was in there, so we go back to the early days with him. He's a retired attorney here that y'all all know or heard about. Very famous, popular. This is just a wonderful town to live in. It's a wonderful place to live. Peggy Cheshire, as I know her, is here tonight. and her mother ran the Joy Theater. And I haven't seen her since she was about 4 years old. And but it's good that she's here. And I worked at the Joy Theater, as a lot of people did, running those machines up there. That was part of being in high school. You did something like that. I surely got something else that you want to hear about, but right now I think that maybe with the museum on schedule, and I've talked almost 30 minutes, I think maybe we ought to sort of cut this off and head down to the museum. But I got one thing to tell you before I leave. You know, we know that you can talk a long time and never say anything. We found that out from these politicians running for president. But there was a preacher one time that thought he could do it too. And he got his congregation and he says, "Gather around me, brothers and sisters, for today I'm going to preach to you the evil of all, the source of all evil in Apples. Was not that on one Friday morning that Sir Humphrey Grady Newton lay snoozing under that apple tree, that one of those large-sized red pippins fell off and hit him right square dab in the right eye. Right then and there, he arose, exclaimed, proclaimed, and reclaimed that patent lever principle by which all of the luminous and polyluminous planets circumnavigate together around the sun in one grand equilibrium, you know. Good night."
Had a good time. I think we may have to get him to come back and do round 2. I'll have to talk to him about that. But Frank has lots of wonderful stories, and that's why a museum is so important, because we need to preserve those stories. So Larry Milford, I believe, is running to the museum to open the doors. So if you would, y'all can adjourn to the museum and take a guided tour. If you need pledge cards, I have them, and I will meet you at the museum. Thank y'all all for coming tonight.